Kneel down and wash them properly. The command silenced the grand ballroom faster than a shattered glass. 200 guests stood beneath crystal chandeliers inside the Beaumont estate, dressed in black silk, diamonds, and tailored evening suits. Moments earlier, they had been laughing beneath white orchids and raising champagne glasses to celebrate billionaire Everett Beaumont's engagement. Now every face had turned toward the center of the room. 29-year-old Zuri Bennett stood beside an overturned silver basin, her black maid's uniform damp across the knees. Warm water spread over the polished floor, carrying rose petals between the shoes of nearby guests. In front of her sat Everett's fiancée, Vivienne Laurent. Vivienne wore a pale gold gown and a smile so controlled that anyone arriving late might have mistaken the scene for part of the evening's entertainment. She slowly lifted one jeweled sandal and placed her bare foot on the edge of the basin. "You spilled water on my dress," she said. "The least you can do is finish what you started." Zuri's fingers tightened around the white towel in her hand. "I didn't spill it, Miss Laurent." A murmur moved through the crowd. Vivienne tilted her head. "Are you calling me a liar?" Zuri looked toward the catering assistant standing near the service door. The young man had seen Vivienne kick the basin. But the moment their eyes met, he lowered his head. Nobody wanted to lose a job over the dignity of a maid. Vivienne extended her foot farther. "Wash it." Zuri's face burned, but she did not move. Inside the pocket of her apron rested a small silver sewing thimble that had belonged to her mother. Its surface was scratched from years of use, and one side carried a tiny engraved letter, B. Her mother had once told her, "Never let another person's cruelty decide who you become." Zuri held on to those words now. "I will clean the floor," she said. "But I will not wash your feet." Vivienne's elegant smile disappeared. "You work in my future home. I work for Mr. Beaumont. Soon there will be no difference." Vivienne rose from the chair and stepped closer. Her voice dropped low enough that only Zuri and the nearest guests could hear. "Your brother's medical treatment depends on the salary you earn here. Think carefully before pride makes you unemployed." Zuri's breath caught. Vivienne was not supposed to know about Micah. Before Zuri could answer, a man spoke from behind the circle of guests. "There will always be a difference." The crowd separated. Everett Beaumont stood near the ballroom entrance in a black tuxedo, his expression calm enough to be frightening. At 40, he had spent years negotiating deals powerful men called impossible. But the look in his eyes now held none of the patience he brought into boardrooms. Vivienne's face transformed instantly. "Everett, there you are. This has become such an embarrassing misunderstanding." He walked toward them without answering. His gaze passed over the basin, Zuri's wet uniform, Vivienne's bare foot, and the guests who had watched without intervening. Then his eyes settled on Zuri. "Did she order you to kneel?" Zuri swallowed. Vivienne answered for her. "She dropped the basin on me. I asked her to correct her mistake." Everett looked at the water on the floor. "The basin is 6 feet from where she was serving." Vivienne's smile trembled. She was careless. Everett reached for her left hand. For one hopeful second, Vivienne believed he was comforting her. Instead, he removed the diamond engagement ring from her finger. Several guests gasped. Vivienne stared at her empty hand. "What are you doing?" Everett placed the ring inside his jacket pocket. "I am making sure you cannot use my name while I learn what happened here." The humiliation in Vivienne's face quickly turned into fear. Not anger. Fear. Zuri noticed it. Everett had witnessed only the final moments, but Vivienne reacted as though he were about to uncover something far more dangerous than cruelty in a ballroom. 4 days earlier, Zuri Bennett had arrived at the Beaumont estate before sunrise. The mansion stood above the Hudson River behind iron gates and winter bear gardens. Its west wing housed Everett's private art collection. The east wing contained guest suites that were opened only for charity events and family celebrations. Zuri entered through the staff kitchen carrying a paper bag filled with medication and a folded hospital invoice. Her younger brother Micah was 22 and had been waiting 8 months for a kidney transplant. Insurance covered most of his treatment, but not everything. Zuri had taken every extra shift she could find, sometimes working 16 hours before returning to the small apartment they shared. She placed the medicine in the staff refrigerator and checked the invoice again. Payment due Monday. The figure at the bottom was more than she earned in 3 months. You won't solve it by staring at it. Zuri turned. Everett stood beside the kitchen doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He rarely entered before 7. At 6:15, he looked less like the billionaire on magazine covers and more like a tired man who had forgotten to sleep. I wasn't aware anyone was here, Zuri said. I could say the same. He placed 1 cup beside her. Zuri looked at it but did not touch it. Staff aren't supposed to drink from the guest service. I made it myself. That explains why it smells dangerous. A faint smile crossed his face. For the past 11 months, their conversations had been brief but easy. Everett remembered staff names, noticed when someone was ill, and never treated gratitude like a favor. His fiancée was different. Vivienne entered the kitchen in a white silk robe, her blonde hair arranged perfectly despite the early hour. She saw the coffee beside Zuri. Then she saw the hospital invoice. What is that? She asked. Zuri folded it immediately. Nothing related to work. Vivienne stepped closer. Before Zuri could stop her, she lifted the paper from the counter and read Micah's name. Her eyes moved to the amount owed. Then she smiled. It was not sympathy. It was the expression of someone who had just discovered exactly where to apply pressure. Everett noticed the change in Vivienne's expression. You can put that down, he said. She looked up from the hospital invoice as though she had forgotten anyone else was in the room. I was only concerned. Zuri reached for the paper. Vivienne kept it for 1 second longer, then released it. Your brother is ill? Everett asked. Zuri folded the invoice and slipped it inside her bag. He's waiting for a kidney transplant. How long? 8 months. And you've been managing this alone? Zuri forced a small smile. Micah would argue that he manages me. Everett did not smile back. Why didn't you tell me you needed help? Because I was hired to manage your home, not bring my problems into it. That doesn't answer the question. It does for me. Vivienne placed one hand lightly against Everett's chest. She clearly values her privacy. We should respect that. The sweetness in her voice made Zuri's skin tighten. Vivienne was not protecting her privacy. She was making sure Everett stopped asking questions. Everett looked at Zuri again. If your schedule needs adjusting for hospital appointments, speak to Mrs. Holloway. Thank you, sir. And if there's an emergency, call me directly. Vivienne's fingers pressed more firmly against his jacket. Everett, you have a board presentation in 40 minutes. He checked his watch. You're right. Before leaving, he glanced at the silver thimble resting near Zuri's bag. What is that? Zuri picked it up. My mother's. Vivienne's attention sharpened instantly. The thimble was small and worn, with the engraved letter B barely visible along one edge. Your mother was a seamstress? Everett asked. For most of her life. What was her name? Naomi Bennett. A porcelain cup slipped from Vivienne's hand. It struck the marble counter and broke. Everyone froze. Vivienne stared at the thimble. Then she laughed weakly. My hand was wet. Zuri looked at the perfectly dry countertop. Everett bent to collect the larger pieces. Leave it, Zuri said. You'll cut yourself. For a moment, he looked almost amused that she had ordered him away from broken glass. Then his phone rang. "I have to go." Vivienne followed him from the kitchen, but before disappearing through the doorway, she looked back at Zuri. The warning in her eyes was unmistakable. That afternoon, Zuri found a sealed garment bag hanging inside the East Wing fitting room. A note pinned to it carried Vivienne's handwriting. "Repair the lower hem by tonight. Do not use an outside tailor." Inside was a vintage ivory evening gown covered with delicate hand-sewn pearls. Zuri lifted the fabric carefully. The workmanship was familiar. Not because she had seen the gown before, but because she had watched her mother use the same hidden stitch hundreds of times. Naomi Bennett had called it the river seam, a narrow, nearly invisible pattern she claimed no machine could reproduce correctly. Zuri turned the hem inside out. Beneath the lining, stitched in faded blue thread, were two initials. NB. Her breath stopped. Her mother had made this gown. Zuri remembered Naomi working late at their kitchen table years earlier, bending over expensive fabric while telling her children the dress belonged to someone who would never admit who had created it. "The family paid for silence," Naomi had said once. "Then they sold my hands as their history." At the time, Zuri had been too young to understand. Now Vivienne's reaction to the thimble made sense. Footsteps sounded behind her. Zuri lowered the gown. Vivienne stood in the doorway. "You were told to repair it, not inspect it." "My mother made this." Vivienne closed the door. "Your mother worked for many people. These are her initials. They prove nothing. They prove you recognized her name this morning." Vivienne crossed the room slowly. "My grandmother owned Laurent Couture. Your mother was one of dozens of women who worked in the back rooms. My mother designed this seam. Your mother sewed what she was told to sew." Zuri's jaw tightened. "Then why hide her initials beneath the lining?" Vivienne snatched the gown from her hands. "You have no idea what families like mine sacrificed to build a name. And you have no idea what women like my mother sacrificed so your family could own one." The slap did not come. Vivienne raised her hand, then stopped herself. The restraint was more frightening than anger. "You need this job," she said quietly. Zuri thought of Micah's invoice. "Yes. You need your health benefits." "Yes. And you need Everett to believe you are trustworthy." Zuri held her gaze. "What do you want?" Vivienne smiled. "Nothing complicated. Repair the gown. Forget the initials. Forget what you think you remember. And if I don't?" Vivienne placed the dress on the table and smoothed the pearls. "Hospital billing departments make mistakes. Staff members are accused of theft. Recommendations disappear." She stepped closer. "Lives become difficult very quickly." That evening, Zuri remained in the sewing room after the other employees left. She repaired the hem, but before closing the lining, she photographed the initials and the river seam. Then she noticed something hard beneath the fabric. A narrow envelope had been sewn into the inner panel. Inside was a yellowed letter written in Naomi Bennett's handwriting. Zuri read the first line. "If anything happens to me, the Beaumont family must learn who truly designed the Laurent collection." Her hands began to shake. At the bottom of the letter was another name. Margaret Beaumont. Everett's late mother. Zuri heard movement outside the door. She quickly hid the letter inside her uniform. The handle turned. Vivienne entered carrying Zuri's hospital invoice. This time, a red stamp covered the front. "Payment denied." Vivienne placed it beside the gown. "Now," she said, "do you understand what happens when you refuse to stay in your place?" Zuri stared at the red stamp. "Who contacted the hospital?" Vivienne leaned against the sewing table. "You assume too much. My brother's treatment was approved yesterday. And today it isn't." Zuri folded the invoice slowly. You're using a sick man to frighten me. I'm reminding you that consequences rarely arrive alone. Vivienne reached for the repaired gown. Destroy the letter. Zuri's pulse jumped, but her face remained still. What letter? The silence confirmed too much. Vivienne's expression hardened. My grandmother warned me Naomi Bennett hid copies of everything. She was always dramatic. My mother was protecting her work. She was trying to steal the Laurent name. Then why are you afraid of her handwriting? Vivienne stepped closer. Because Everett's mother believed her. Zuri touched the hidden letter beneath her uniform. What did Everett Beaumont know? Vivienne's calm finally cracked. She knew enough to create problems. Before Zuri could ask more, the fitting room door opened. Everett stood in the hallway. Vivienne turned instantly, smoothing her expression. You're home early. My meeting ended. His gaze moved from Zuri's pale face to the denied hospital invoice. What happened? Vivienne answered first. Zuri became upset over a billing issue. I was trying to calm her. Everett picked up the paper. This was approved yesterday. Zuri looked at him. How do you know? I called the hospital this morning. Vivienne's eyes narrowed. Everett continued, I asked the foundation to cover the remaining balance anonymously. Someone cancelled the authorization 2 hours later. He looked directly at his fiancée. Only 3 people had access. Vivienne gave a quiet laugh. You cannot possibly think I interfere with hospital payments. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. Everett turned to Zuri. Did she threaten you? Zuri felt the letter against her ribs and remembered Micah connected to machines, waiting for a phone call that might save his life. Then she remembered her mother's words. Never let cruelty decide who you become. Yes, she said. Vivienne's face went still. Zuri continued. She threatened my job, my brother's treatment, and my reputation because my mother left evidence inside this gown. Everett looked at the dress. What evidence? Zuri reached beneath her uniform and removed the yellowed letter. Vivienne lunged for it. Everett caught her wrist before she could tear it away. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then he took the letter and read Everett Beaumont's name at the bottom. His expression changed. My mother knew Naomi Bennett. Zuri nodded. Vivienne pulled her hand free. That letter is forged. Everett unfolded it fully. Inside was a second page Zuri had not yet read. Across the top, Margaret had written, The Laurent collection was created by Naomi Bennett, and Vivienne's grandmother paid me to keep silent. Everett looked up. Vivienne had already reached for the fireplace matches. Vivienne struck the match. Everett moved first. He pulled the letter away as the flame touched its lower edge, then crushed the match beneath his shoe. A black mark scarred the carpet, but the pages remained intact. What are you doing? He asked. Vivienne's composure finally shattered. You don't understand what that letter could do. To your family's reputation? To everything. Everett handed the document to Zuri and stepped between them. Go to my study. Lock the door and photograph every page. Zuri hesitated. What about the dinner? The dinner can wait. Vivienne grabbed his arm. No, it cannot. 200 guests are already arriving. The Laurent exhibition is the centerpiece of tonight's charity auction. If this becomes public now, both families will be destroyed. Everett removed her hand. My family is not protected by burying another woman's name. Vivienne's eyes filled with furious tears. You think Naomi was innocent? She demanded ownership of the collection after my grandmother made her successful. She demanded credit, Zuri said. She was paid. To sew, Zuri replied. Not to disappear. Everett's phone rang. The hospital director's name appeared on the screen. He answered on speaker. "Mr. Beaumont, we traced the cancellation of Micah Bennett's treatment authorization. The request came from an account connected to the Laurent Foundation." Everett looked at Vivienne. She stepped backward. The director continued, "We restored the payment immediately. Mr. Bennett's care will not be interrupted." Zuri closed her eyes with relief. "Thank you." After the call ended, Everett turned toward Vivienne. "You endangered a patient to silence his sister." "I delayed paperwork," she snapped. "Don't make it sound criminal. You used a hospital as a weapon." From downstairs came the sound of applause as the first guests entered the ballroom. Vivienne looked toward the door. Then her expression became strangely calm. "You still need my family tonight," she said. "The auction donors came because of the Laurent name. Cancel the exhibition, and your hospital loses millions." Everett said nothing. Vivienne mistook his silence for surrender. She lifted the vintage gown from the table. "Zuri will serve during the auction. She will say nothing, and tomorrow we can handle this privately." Zuri stared at her. Vivienne smiled again. "If she refuses, every donor downstairs will hear that an employee forged letters to steal a famous collection." Everett looked at Zuri. "Do you trust me for 1 hour?" Zuri tightened her fingers around Margaret's letter. "Yes." "Then attend the auction." Vivienne's smile returned. But Everett's eyes stayed cold. She believed he had chosen the engagement. She did not know he had already instructed the ballroom technician to display every photographed page on the main screen. The ballroom lights dimmed as Everett stepped onto the stage. Behind him, the vintage ivory gown stood inside a glass display case beneath a gold plaque that read, "The Laurent Legacy Collection." 200 guests turned toward him. Hospital trustees, editors, donors, and reporters expected an engagement announcement and a record-breaking auction. Vivienne stood beside the gown in pale gold silk, smiling as though the last hour had never happened. Zuri waited near the service wall with a silver tray in her hands. Her knees felt weak, but her mother's thimble rested inside her apron pocket. Everett approached the microphone. "Tonight was meant to celebrate generosity," he began. "But generosity without truth is only performance." Vivienne's smile tightened. The screen behind him lit up. The first image showed the hidden initials inside the gown. NB. A murmur passed through the ballroom. The next image revealed Naomi Bennett's letter. Then Margaret Beaumont's handwritten statement appeared beneath it, confirming that Naomi had designed the collection and that the Laurent family had paid for her silence. Vivienne moved toward the stage. "Turn that off." Everett did not look at her. For 24 years, Naomi Bennett's work was sold under another family's name. When she demanded credit, she was threatened, discredited, and pushed out of the industry. Vivienne reached for the microphone. "This is a forged letter brought here by a desperate employee." Everett stepped aside. "Then explain the second document." The screen changed again. A bank ledger appeared, showing payments from Laurent Couture to Margaret Beaumont, each marked as consulting fees. Beside them were copies of Naomi's original sketches, all dated before the Laurent collection was announced. One fashion editor rose from her chair. "I recognize those sketches," she said. "They match the original winter campaign exactly." Another guest lifted his phone and began recording. Vivienne's face hardened. She was a seamstress. "My grandmother gave her opportunities." Zuri set down her tray and walked toward the stage. The room felt impossibly large. "My mother did not ask to own your family," she said. "She asked to own her own name." Vivienne looked at her with open hatred. "You think these people care about a dead woman no one remembers?" Everett's voice turned cold. "They will remember her now." He signaled to the hospital director. The director joined him on stage and faced the guests. We also confirmed that an authorization for Micah Bennett's treatment was cancelled through an account connected to the Laurent Foundation. That payment has been restored, and the matter has been referred for investigation. Gasps moved through the ballroom. Vivienne turned toward Everett. You promised to protect me. I promised to marry the woman I believed you were. She reached for his hand. Everett, please. Think about our families. He took her left hand gently. Then he removed the diamond ring. The ballroom fell silent. He placed it beside the microphone. Our engagement is over. Vivienne stared at the ring. You would humiliate me in front of everyone for a maid. Everett looked toward Zuri. No. I am ending this because you humiliated a woman you believed had no power to answer you. Security approached as Vivienne's father tried to leave through a side door. Investigators were already waiting in the corridor. Vivienne was escorted from the ballroom while cameras followed every step. The auction continued, but the gown was removed from the Laurent display. Instead, Everett announced that it would be preserved under Naomi Bennett's name. Every dollar raised would support independent designers and medical care for low-income families. Within 6 months, Laurent Couture issued a public correction and paid Naomi's estate a settlement. Micah received his transplant and began recovering. Zuri did not remain a maid. Using the settlement and her mother's sketches, she opened a small design studio called Bennett House. Everett visited often, first to discuss the charity program, later simply because he wanted to see her. A year after the ballroom scandal, Naomi's ivory gown appeared in a museum exhibition. Its new plaque read, "Designed by Naomi Bennett. Sewn by the hands history tried to erase." Zuri stood beside Micah as visitors gathered around it. She removed the silver thimble from her pocket and placed it inside the display. Everett joined her quietly. Are you sure? He asked. Zuri smiled through tears. She doesn't need me to carry it anymore. Across the glass, the engraved letter B caught the light. For the first time, it did not stand for Beaumont. It stood for Bennett.